already tell clearly it was the worst put the house on it move we've seen in the history of sports. Today we learned the Browns restructuring again Deshaun Watson's contract, $36 million in cap space being open for them as they're going to try and look to make some maneuvers around Myles Garrett and the bunch because, again, they've been saying since Garrett requested the trade, he ain't going nowhere. They got the number 2 pick in the draft. They now have a little bit of flexibility to be able to try and make some moves around the edges, around whatever rookie quarterback they fall or decide to pick up at number 2 and try and build together a competent bunch. But C-Cat, ever since they made this deal, ever since they sold their soul literally for a man who feels somewhat soulless from the outside looking in, it has been nothing but bad things, just hailstorming on this franchise. Watson, we knew, was not a sure thing. Watson, we knew, was a bit of a gamble when you're giving a guy the first ever or fully guaranteed contract. And at the time of that deal, 5 years, $230 million, it was the most lucrative deal in the history of the league. We know that was a bit of a wager, but we did not know it would turn out this bad this soon. I mean, they're still tied to this guy. When you make that kind of a deal, when you trade away your future, all of the picks that went out the door, and you also extend the guy for 5 years, I'm sure Andrew Berry and them in the front office of Cleveland were like, yo, we're making this deal today, and we're going to be building this franchise, this roster around this contract for the next 5 years. And they were right. They are. But instead of that contract and that deal being something that is advantageous because of his play on the field, it is actually something that is working actively against them as they try and figure out how do we keep restructuring, building up space, and building around paying a guy $50 million a year who is not taking any snaps for us. This is incredibly bad.
Yeah, it's bad. I can't knock the Browns for going out and spending a lot of money on probably the best quarterback to become a free agent.
He wasn't even a free agent, though. He just became available, but you're right.
Like for being shopped, Deshaun Watson, go out and get him. But the guaranteed, there's a reason why those contracts weren't guaranteed. And they broke that cardinal rule, that cardinal sin that NFL owners kind of all agreed upon, and they paid the price for it, no doubt.
The weirdest part about this, and again, it is the worst wager in the history of sports based on what they gave up in capital for Deshaun Watson, the contract that they guaranteed him, and everything that has transpired since. The worst part about all of this is you look at the one person who benefits the most, and it's number 4. It's Deshaun Watson. I know he's probably not going to play in a Browns uniform again, another day in his life, because once again he ruptured his other Achilles after already tearing one of them in his rehab process. He will not see the field in 2025. In fact, I assume they're going to actually get a rookie quarterback in this draft and try and go that route because they need a cheaper, a less expensive player at that position since they're paying him so much, since he counts so much against the cap. I assume that's the route they take, C-Cat. But what I do know, and I don't have to assume, he's never going to take another snap for them again. And when you look at how much money Watson has made since literally, and what was the tipping point to all of this? The tipping point to this was he didn't want to play in Houston anymore. He got caught up with all of those allegations of sexual misconduct in all those massage rooms. And the reward that he got from that was an unprecedented contract. He's played 19 games. Deshaun Watson has suited up and played 19 games for the Cleveland Browns in these past 3 years since that deal has happened. Damn it, most quarterbacks that started the full season this year, there's like at least 5 or 6 of them that played more than that in this one season.
Well, and also those 19 games weren't good. So it's not just that it was injury-riddled. He also was exceptionally bad at the quarterback position. Like, he is night and day between what we saw with Deshaun Watson, the last we saw of him in a Texans uniform against the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC divisional round. He was a great quarterback.
Yeah.
They had a 3-possession lead over Patrick Mahomes in the first half. And what we're seeing now, it's just incomparable.
Deshaun Watson's last season with the Texans, people forget this too, right? 4,800 passing yards. I believe that was number 1 in the NFL. 33 touchdowns and 7 interceptions. He had a 112.4 passer rating, his QBR, I believe, in the 70s. That was his last year with the Texans in 2020. So there was a lot of reason to believe he could be a great an elite level quarterback. He was the first heir apparent to Patrick Mahomes. Like before Josh Allen became a credible villain or rival to Mahomes, before Lamar Jackson did anything quantifiable in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes, Deshaun Watson was the heir apparent to the Air Jordan of today's NFL in Patrick Mahomes. That's gone all the way by the wayside. In 2020, when he did that, those astronomical numbers, 2C Cat, when people just go back and look at his Pro Football Reference, they're probably going to think, oh, yeah, well, maybe, did he have DeAndre Hopkins was out there in Houston. But no, he wasn't. Not that year. Not the year where he was literally one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and put up one of the best stat lines. I believe that year in Houston, when he did all of that, his number one receiver was like Will Fuller. He was great.
Yeah, he was great. Like you said, heir apparent to Patrick Mahomes. I guess it's a weird way to put it because they were in the same draft. But the kind of the joke, running joke against Bears fans was that they drafted Mitch Trubisky at 2nd overall from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And Pat Mahomes that went 10th in that draft. Deshaun Watson went 12th in that draft. Where it's almost like, I know things have been tough for Bears fans, but at least Mitch Trubisky got them to a playoff game.
Yeah.
And a double doink away from a playoff win and didn't cripple the team financially for a decade to come?
He didn't. And he also didn't, it was a bad mark on the franchise in the first place, morally, to wager the future on that guy because of all of the unresolved at the time, too. That's the other part of it. I know today we can look at it and say, well, criminally, he didn't suffer any, he settled out of court. We don't know. Somebody's lying. It was 26 plus, sexual misconduct allegations made from different massage therapists throughout, not just in Houston, right? This is happening all over the place with Watson. And not only were the numbers outrageous, all of the stories aligning and whatnot, it only takes common sense to realize this guy probably did a little bit of that. This guy might have meddled in some things that I would think is unsavory. So for them to wager the future on him in the way that they did with the amount of draft capital they did and then giving him that contract while also working against what you would assume are the morals and ethics that these very men, Andrew Berry, the GM, the Haslams that own the Browns, these very men would probably pride themselves on having or at least want their kids to exemplify. These are the things you want young men and women to go by. Good ethics, good morals. You want to have a culture and a locker room of people that you consider good. Watson was everything but that when they made the deal for him. So there's really nothing they can glean positive from this. Mitch Trubisky just wasn't that good at football, right? He squirrels out a good year, and then he never really was the same.
Just another names on the list of failed Bears quarterbacks.
But this dude was a black eye on your franchise the moment you got him because of the allegations, and then he never even gave you a good game. Not a good season, not a good stretch. He never really gave you a good game.
He somehow is a bigger black eye, lowering the standard below.
To slow it down to black. Were you afraid you were going to roll it in the black guy or something? He makes it sound weird.
Yeah. Money Manziel was the recent failure story of Browns quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Baker Mayfield, in hindsight, feels like an even bigger failure in a Browns uniform because they didn't stick with him, and he chose to play a little bit injured. There's a bunch of different ways and fashions the Browns have failed at the game of football, specifically failed that quarterback position, but they reinvented a new way to fail at the quarterback position with the Deshaun Watson deal.
I don't think you can ever trump this. I think not only is this the worst sports wager in the history of all sports, all major American sports, it feels impossible to trump based on all of the parameters around it, right? The Browns just went 3-14. They have the number 2 pick in the draft for a reason, and part of that was this investment into Deshaun Watson. They also, the picks that they gave up, let's go back to it. Again, March 18th, 2022, less than 3 years ago, right? It was Deshaun Watson and a 6th-round pick in 2024 that the Texans sent out. The Browns sent out a 1st and a 4th in 22, a 1st and a 3rd in 23, a 1st and a 4th in 24. Right? That's 6 total picks, 3 of them first-rounders. One of them, by the way, turned into some dude named Will Anderson. Have you heard of him?
It's pretty good.
Yeah. Some dude named Will Anderson. How's the franchise doing right now that the Browns actually made this big blockbuster deal with to get their franchise quarterback, the Houston Texans? I think they fared pretty well.
Yeah, playoff win last year.
Yeah.
Playoff win the year before that.
Huh.